On Wednesday night, June 24, 2026, something happened at the Xcel Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota that made a lot of people catch their breath. About an hour into the opening night of his Sing a Song All Night Long tour, Mater Fire figures over a co-headlining run with Earth, Wind & Fire that had been one of the most anticipated summer tours of the year, Lionel Richie sat down on the steps at the front of the stage. Not the kind of casual sitting that performers sometimes do. The kind of sitting that happens when your body is telling you something you cannot ignore. He looked at the crowd and said, "I need to sit, and that's a bad sign." He performed one more song from that seated position. Then a 40-minute intermission was called. Then his saxophonist came back out to announce what the crowd had already half suspected. The show was over. Richie was taken to a local hospital by paramedics. He was 77 years old. The cause was severe dehydration and overheating. He has since been released, is resting on doctor's orders, and says he is heartbroken about what happened. The Chicago and Columbus shows immediately following have been postponed, with the tour expected to resume June 30th. He's going to be fine, but for the hours before that was confirmed and for the people who have grown up with his music, who have had his songs in the background of the best and hardest moments of their lives, there was a moment of real worry. Because it is worth asking, occasionally, what would it mean to lose Lionel Richie? What exactly is it that he has given us? Let's answer that question properly. Lionel Brockman Richie Jr. was born on June 20, 1949, in Tuskegee, Alabama, 1949, a town with a specific and extraordinary history. Tuskegee was the birthplace of Rosa Parks. It was home to the Tuskegee Airmen, the first African-American military aviators in the United States Armed Forces. And it was the home of Tuskegee University, one of the most historically significant HBCUs in America, whose campus Richie grew up on, because his grandfather had worked directly with the university's founder, Booker T. Washington. He grew up surrounded by education, music, and history. His grandmother was a classical piano teacher, and similarly for music, she tried to teach him to read music, and he never quite mastered it, which he later discovered was actually liberating. He accepted a tennis scholarship to Tuskegee University, and in his second year, walking across campus one day, he ran into a couple of members of a group who called themselves the Mystics. He joined them. They eventually became the Commodores. The Commodores were signed to Motown Records in 1971 and spent the rest of the decade building one of the most successful careers in soul and funk music. They opened for the Jackson 5. They developed a sound that moved between hard funk and something softer and more personal. Ballads that Richie mostly wrote, songs that stripped away the noise and went straight to the emotional core of human experience. Easy! 3 Times a Lady, Sail On, Still. Richie wrote all of them, sang lead on all of them, and in doing so built the Commodores into something that extended far beyond the funky party band bracket the music industry might have placed them in. He was, from the very beginning, a storyteller. A poet who happened to put his poems to music. Before Richie was a solo star, he was something rarer and more valuable in the music business. An extraordinary songwriter willing to write for other people. In 1980, country icon Kenny Rogers came to him looking for a song. Richie had never given a song to another artist before. He wrote Lady for Rogers in a matter of days. It hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, the country charts, and the adult contemporary charts simultaneously. It stayed at #1 for 6 consecutive weeks. It remains one of the most covered songs in country music history. Then, in 1981, came Endless Love. Written for a Brooke Shields film of the same name, Richie recorded it as a duet with Diana Ross. It topped the charts in 8 countries. It became the biggest single in Motown Records history at that point, staying at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 9 weeks. It remains in the top 20 best-selling singles of all time. Both Richie and Ross have called it the biggest commercial moment of their respective careers. The success of Endless Love made one thing impossible to ignore. Lionel Richie was too big to remain in a group. Not because of ego, he has always spoken about the Commodores with genuine warmth and gratitude, but because the outside world had decided what he was, and it was bigger than any single band could contain. He went solo in 1982. Between 1982 and 1987, Lionel Richie had a run of commercial success that has almost no equivalent in the history of American popular music. He achieved #1 singles in 9 consecutive years, Per Nuni Knees Can Seven Cerise, a feat matched only by Irving Berlin. In the history of recorded music, just 2 people. The album Lionel Richie, released in 1982, gave him Truly. Can't Slow Down in 1983, his second solo album, was certified diamond in the United States and won the Grammy for Album of the Year. It contained All Night Long, a Caribbean-flavored celebration that he performed at the closing ceremony of the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics in front of a global television audience. It contained Hello, the piano ballad with the most recognizable video in 1980s pop music, featuring a blind art student who sculpts a likeness of her teacher's face. He later joked to the video's director that the sculpture looked nothing like him. Hello went to number 1. All Night Long went to number 1. Stuck on You went to number 1. Say You, Say Me went to number 1. And won the Academy Award for Best Original Song. Dancing on the Ceiling went to number 1. And then, in 1985, came the moment that transcended even all of that. In January 1985, Richie and Michael Jackson spent about an hour and 45 minutes in Jackson's kitchen, writing a song together that they hoped would raise money for famine relief in Ethiopia. That song was We Are the World. 45 of the biggest recording artists in America recorded it in a single session at A&M Studios in Hollywood on the night of January 28, 1985, the same night as the American Music Awards. It sold over 20 million copies. It raised more than $50 million for famine relief. It remains one of the best-selling singles in history. Richie was 35 years old. He had already written some of the most beloved songs in the world. He had just co-written one of the most important. After the peak of the 1980s, Lionel Richie did something that very few artists at his level of fame manage. He stepped away, rested, and came back. He spent several years largely out of the spotlight in the late 1980s, dealing with a prolonged and painful divorce from his first wife, caring for his ill father, and, by his own account, simply exhausted after 2 decades of relentless work. He returned in 1992 with new material. He returned again in 1996, and again in 2000, and again in 2006, each time finding audiences that had missed him, and new audiences discovering him for the first time. In 2012, he released Tuskegee, and a collection of his greatest hits reimagined as country duets, recorded with artists like Willie Nelson, Kenny Rogers, Shania Twain, Tim McGraw, and Blake Shelton. It went to number 1 on both the Billboard 200 and the country charts. It was one of the best-selling albums of that year. In the history of music, very few artists have topped the pop charts in the 1980s, and then topped the country charts in the 2010s. Richie did it like it was obvious. In 2016, he launched a Las Vegas residency. In 2018, he became a judge on the revival of American Idol alongside Katy Perry and Luke Bryan, a role he held for 7 seasons, bringing warmth and genuine musical knowledge to a platform that reached millions of viewers every week. He performed at Glastonbury in 2015 to what the festival described as the largest audience in its history. He received the Kennedy Center Honors in 2017. He received the Gershwin Prize for Popular Song from the Library of Congress in 2022. He is 77 years old. He was on stage in St. Paul, Minnesota on a Wednesday night in June, performing for thousands of people who came to hear him sing the songs that have been part of their lives for decades. There is something I want to say about that moment when Lionel Richie sat down on the steps during Dancing on the Ceiling. He didn't pretend it wasn't happening. He looked at the crowd and said, plainly, I need to sit. And that's a bad sign. That honesty, the refusal to push through and fake it, the willingness to say out loud what the situation actually was, is very consistent with who Lionel Richie has always been. He has always spoken plainly about the big things, about his divorce, about his faith, about the difficulty of fame and the responsibility it carries. He is not a performer who hides himself behind the persona. And when his body told him something was wrong, he sat down. He told the truth, he let the concert end, and he expressed, afterward, being heartbroken about it. Not because of the revenue or the logistics, but because those were his people in that arena, and he had wanted to give them everything. He's going to be fine. Severe dehydration is serious but treatable, and he has been released from the hospital and is resting. The tour will resume on June 30th. But the moment on the steps is worth sitting with, because it reminds us, in the gentlest possible way, that the people who give us music are people. That the voice that has been in the background of our lives, that has played at our weddings and our funerals and our Friday nights and our lonely Tuesday mornings, belongs to a human being who sits down when he has to. At 77 years old, Lionel Richie is still showing up, still performing, still giving people the songs they have carried for decades. That is not nothing, that is extraordinary. Here is the thing about Lionel Richie that I think gets underestimated. He is one of only 2 songwriters in history to achieve #1 singles in 9 consecutive years. The other is Irving Berlin, a man who wrote White Christmas. Lionel Richie is in that company. He co-wrote one of the best-selling singles in the history of recorded music. He has sold over 100 million records worldwide. He has won 6 Grammy Awards, an Academy Award, a Kennedy Center Honor, and the Gershwin Prize. He wrote Lady, and Endless Love, and We Are the World, and Hello, and All Night Long, and 3 Times a Lady, and Easy. And at 77, he was on stage in Minnesota on a Wednesday night, doing what he has done since a kid from Tuskegee joined a band called the Mystics and discovered he could tell stories in music. He sat down on the steps. He told the crowd it was a bad sign. He went to the hospital, got checked out, and is already talking about getting back on that stage. Get well soon, Lionel! We'll be here when you get back. If Lionel Richie's music has meant something to you, drop your favorite song in the comments, and send some good energy his way. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.